quest to find the mecca of West Coast basketball continued during the commercial break.
We found the mecca of Sacramento basketball. I think the mecca of Sacramento basketball. It might be 10th and P. I think it really comes down to 10th and P and Reichmuth, and I think I might have to give it to 10th and P. Man, I felt like I was in Harlem when I go playing 10th and P, and I see the quote unquote skyscrapers around me. I felt like I was right there in Harlem.
You ever been to Harlem?
Yeah.
You played ball in Harlem, and you felt like being at 10th and P was like being in Harlem? Because that's wild. That's like Kenny Adoko. I was at Times Square, yo. Like there was lights and Doko signs, and
I'll talk about the buildings, man. Seeing the buildings around you, it made you feel like you were in Harlem.
Those buildings. When I graduated from high school, I worked on the downtown plaza build, and then when that job ended, I went to the Secretary of State's office, which is on 9th and 10th and O&P. The three buildings right there. So I helped do some construction right there. Nice. Those big buildings
when James
you're
says
talking
he
about.
helps with the building, he doesn't mean like legislature or getting like no, he built it. Like he helped build it. A guy who walks into an arena with a cordless drill, like he goes and builds stuff, man. That's what he does. When you talk to the Kings PR staff about sawing part of a table off in the media area,
that's right.
That's James Ham. That is our 1320 Kings insider, soon to be our 1320 Final Four insider. I mentioned, I told everyone as the dogs are excited at the Ham household in Amsterdam over there, that you're making the trip out to New Orleans this weekend.
I am making the trip.
He's muting us the best he can. You're doing it's all right, buddy.
I am making the trip to New Orleans this weekend. I'm very, very excited. I thought that my trip was done. I did not think I was going to New Orleans, but I have been given medical clearance to go to New Orleans. I have not been given medical clearance to pick up a saw for the next 90 days. I will not be picking up saws or cordless drills or anything else, but they are going to let me put on my support hose and take my pills and get on a plane and go to New Orleans.
Hammer got compression tights. Hammer's going to be on the plane with some compression tights.
To quote Buddy Hield, it be like that sometimes. Yes.
Ham going to be on there looking like Brett Favre and Jerry Rice.
That's right.
The joint rock. Break this down for me, because you mentioned it before a little bit. There's a waiting list for the Final Four. Those 90,000 people didn't you say somebody that's how you got the tickets?
Oh yeah. So we have friends who, they put in, there's a lottery. There's a lottery for the Super Bowl, and there's a lottery for the Final Four, and they put in for both, and they won the lottery for 4 tickets. And, I don't know where we're sitting. We're probably going to be like, you can't even see the court, but, that's okay. We'll be there for Coach K's last game, one way or another.
That's gonna be dope. That's gonna be
really dope. That's gonna be amazing. Like Kenny and I have been talking about. We'll get to the Kings here in a second. Kenny and I have been talking about that Saturday night game is going to be bigger than probably any national championship of the last 20 years in terms of like television viewers. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a monster because Duke, North Carolina, they individually draw numbers, and here with their 100th matchup, or at least Coach K's 100th matchup, it's going to be a monster. Is James frozen?
I guess he is.
I don't know if James knows. This is for those that are watching. This for those that are watching, this is just spectacular.
Somebody screen record this. This is
James is frozen. So, all right. Well, I don't know what to do. Maybe James is doing a reset over there at the Ham hat. There, hold on.
Oh no! Now there's two names.
Wait a second. It won't let me put the other one back in the screen. Oh, James, you froze in spectacular fashion there for a moment. That's good stuff. It's all right, buddy. It happens. Great. It's technology, man. It's a beautiful thing. You are back.
I was just about to say though, I'm looking right now on Game Time. If you want to get into the building, at the Caesar's Palace Superdome or Caesar's Superdome. $595 to get in.
To get into Duke, North Carolina this weekend?
I guess you get you get to both games. You get both games. So
okay.
Yeah, so we have tickets to Saturday and to Monday. So to both games on Saturday. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's going to be a blast.
I'm excited. I don't know. Like I said, I haven't been there at all. So, I mean, I haven't been to the Final Four before. I've been to New Orleans. I love New Orleans. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
The Kings aren't a lot of fun, though they are winning games. James said, hey, if the Kings win the next 6, maybe there is a scenario that DeAaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis come back. Well, we're 2 into that, though you just talked to Alvin Gentry a few minutes ago, and he seemed to be non-committal on what the immediate future was for DeAaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis.
Yeah, I think you get through tonight, right? If you get through this game and somehow beat the Miami Heat, I'm going to guess that all bets are off from then on, because that puts you at 28 wins. What are the Lakers at? 32 wins? 31 wins?
31. 31 and 43.
31, 40, yeah.
Yeah, and it's the way that the games lay out. Like, I could make an argument that the Kings could win every game from here on out. I also know that they haven't won 3 consecutive games all season. Well, they've only done that once, right?
Yeah.
But if they get through tonight and they get into, this Houston series where you got back-to-backs, 2 games in a row against the Rockets, I think you could start seeing some momentum. And then, you come back, you play the Golden State Warriors, which are on the second night of a back-to-back, which means that all of their stars probably won't play. Then you get to New Orleans, which is going to be the biggest game. Again, if you get to that game and you're still in it, then you could see some interesting things happen. And then you get to the final 2 games of the season, and you got 2 teams that have a rooting interest in what's about to happen. And that is you play the Clippers, who don't like sharing a building with the Lakers, don't like being like the redheaded stepchild of LA basketball. And if they could look at a way to drop the Lakers out of the playoffs, they would. And you get to the Phoenix Suns the last day of the season, and if they have to choose between being the number 1 seed and potentially playing LeBron James in the first round and playing the Sacramento Kings in the first round, I'm going to guess that they're going to go with the Kings. And so, again, I'm not saying it's going to happen. What I'm saying is that there is a path. There is a pathway where you could see the Kings winning more games than anyone in Sacramento is comfortable with them winning because of the lottery. And the Lakers, I mean, if the Kings went out, I think the Lakers have to go 3-5, and they would tie, and the Kings would be in, and the Lakers would be out.
And 3-5 seems like a stretch.
It does seem like a stretch. The Lakers' schedule is brutal.
This week they've got Dallas, the Utah, the Pelicans, and Denver this week.
Every team they play is fighting for a playoff spot, is fighting for playoff position, and is better than them.
Yeah, and then there's that. It's not till they get to the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Until the Thunder.
That's it.
So let's give them that. We'll give them that game, but then look at the rest of them. So you're thinking, okay, if the Lakers they have 8 games. So if they go 2-6, and the Kings, that would give the Kings some space.
They can get
because the Kings could get 1 loss. Because here's the deal: the Kings have tiebreakers right now against New Orleans. They have tiebreakers against San Antonio, and they actually have tiebreakers against the Lakers, because it goes, head to head. They split 2-2. Then it goes division record. And as long as you're not a division leader and they're in the same division, Kings have, I think they're 5-8 in the Pacific, and the Lakers are 3-11 in division.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But where this all gets lost, James, and this is why your dogs are playing in the background, they don't appreciate this conversation, is I love listening to the dogs run on the hardwood floor. It's one of my favorite things about when James is with us. The Kings almost lost to Orlando the other night. Like Orlando ain't the Kings nearly lost to them. Buddy Hield dribbled the ball off his foot until further evidence provides he did it on purpose. Come on.
They almost beat Phoenix as well.
Well, they did.
And if they would have won that Phoenix game where they lost by 2, or was it 2 or right around there, 2 or 4.
3.
They would be in it. Oh, is it 3? Yeah.
It was 127 to 124.
Yeah, if they would have won that game, now you're looking at like a really, really interesting situation where, again, the Kings could lose 2 or 3 games here down the stretch, and you look at the Lakers schedule and it's brutal. I told you guys a while ago it was always the Lakers.
So are we not talking about the Spurs? Because we know the Pacers quit. I'm sorry, not the Pacers. The Trailblazers. They quit. I don't even know who plays for the Portland Trailblazers at this point.
Yeah,
but the Spurs have won like 3 in a row.
No.
The Spurs are always going to be tough. They're always going to be battling all the way down the stretch, and they don't give up. But again, the Kings have tiebreakers over the Spurs as well. I think they won the season series 2-1. Like, that's all I'm saying. Like, there is like this weird thing, and I believe that is why Alvin Gentry is not just going really, really young. Like, the fact that he's played Alex Lynn in the last 2 games over Neemias Queta. I mean, that's negligible. Like, that's you're like sitting there like, hey man, like that's not okay. The fact that Josh Jackson still hasn't got a shot, even though I don't really care to see that, but that he hasn't got anything, that tells you that he's still trying to win. He is trying to win every single game here, and that's to the detriment of their lottery pick for sure. But you always have to, like, at some point it has to be about winning and about culture, and about putting players who are about culture and about winning in the position to do that, and letting them try their best to try to make a difference. And I think that's what we're seeing with guys like DiVincenzo and guys like Davion Mitchell, even Trey Lyles. Like, these guys don't want to lose, and like, good for them. Like, that's the funny gray area. Everyone's always like, oh, you got to lose, you got to lose, you got to lose. NBA players don't want to lose because I'm not sure if people understand this, but there are other people waiting for their jobs. So if you don't want to do your job well down the stretch of a season, there's 60 dudes coming in the league next year coming to take your job.
Right.
And another, 15 guys that are trying to break into the league and all that stuff. You got to keep playing. Anytime you get an opportunity at the NBA level, you should be playing hard. And that's where putting players that don't have a chance to really help you win becomes like paramount in this situation if you want to lose. That's why running Josh Jackson out there for 30 minutes or playing Neemias Queta like 28 minutes, it's not because Neemias Queta is a bad player. It's because he's so inexperienced. He can't do what Alex Lynn just did. Like, he just can't. And so it's just a weird situation because, here we are. And I think the Kings are still looking at the play-in game.
And right now, in a weird way, why not? Because I say that because the alternative of trying to be as bad as, the teams in front of you, like, that's kind of gone. Like, you're kind of where you're at. You're going to end up being having the 7th worst record, I would think. You know what I mean? If you finish 500 for the rest of the season, like, you're not catching Indiana. I don't think you're catching Portland once they start rolling like they're rolling right now in a bad way. You're not catching them. So you are where you're at. So why not try to win? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think you can lose enough to get where people want you to get. So let's see what they can do. See if they can win some games.
Yeah, you're 7-8 no matter what at this point. I mean, there's a possibility you could tie for 6, but I don't think so. I told you guys That was the other thing. I said the Lakers are the team to watch out for that could easily just drop this thing. And then the other thing is the Kings have a problem, and that is that they're not good at winning, but there are so many teams in the league that are better at losing than they are. And the Kings aren't good at losing either. Yeah. They win games when you're like, oh, you're killing me, you know?
And why do you think that is? Like, why you can, I don't know what the Pacers are doing, but they're losing, whether they're just that bad or they're setting themselves up in, they're better at losing than the Kings are. Like, why does it feel like the Kings won't just ever, not just this year, but ever just fully, it's Kata, it's Jackson. If we win with those guys, God bless it, there's nothing we can do with it. Let's play Kata, let's play Jackson. Last year, let's play Woodard, let's play Ramsey. Why won't they commit to it and do it?
I don't know, because it really does end up haunting you. You know, I think Orlando is the biggest example, right? We're looking at the Orlando Magic, who end up being the pick right before the Kings. What would the Kings look like with Franz Wagner on the team? Like, and I know Davion's played well, but what would the Kings look like with Franz Wagner next to Harrison Barnes? And he's your starting 3 or 4 for the next decade. And I'm not saying that Davion Mitchell can't be a really good role player, but I still don't know that he's a starter for the next decade. And Franz Wagner certainly is. And you could have even got higher than that, if you would have just gone full tank. I think Josh Giddey went number 6. Like, there are some guys there that could really change the direction of your franchise. And I think Davion's a solid player. He's a good NBA player, and there's potential there. But there are also guys that were at positions of need that, like, if you would have just lost games that you should have lost on the stretch, you would have had a better shot at him. But that also happens when you put pressure on a coach to win. And, you put an interim tag on somebody. And, we talked about with Buddy Hield, what did, like, all these incentives that Vlade Divac put into his contract, all they did was make him worse at basketball. They just made him hunt stats. And so it's the same thing. You put an interim coach in and you say, hey, look, interim coach, here's the deal. We want you to get to the play-in game. And he goes, okay. He's still trying to get into the play-in game. He's an interim coach. If you get to be, if you get to the play-in game, he might be the coach next year. We're not sure what exactly the incentives are for him, but there's a list of them. And now you're like, okay, is that one of the benchmarks? And if he gets there, what does that mean? And so, like, that's the problem when you incentivize certain things, and then you live with the repercussions of what that means. Even if it were at a point where you probably should have pulled the plug on this thing, like, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, and just let this thing play out. I mean, going into the Pacers game, they were the 5 seed. They were the team with the 5th worst record in the NBA. That's a really, really good spot to be in the lottery.
Well, and I'll say this though as well, James. I mean, aside from Harrison Barnes, maybe, I think you mentioned it, what more could they have done? Like, they've not played Fox, they've not played Sabonis. These are guys that are role players. They have one starter on the court in Harrison Barnes, realistically. I mean, I don't want to say they're trying to right now, but they're not really out there throwing out their best lineups, and they're finding ways to win. So it's just one of those things that with the Kings in Sacramento, these things never go the way you probably want them to go.
I'm going to see, I think what we're going to see right here is, how do they finish this trip? If they are still in it at the end of this trip, we're going to see, I think we'll see Fox and Sabonis. Okay, if there's 4 games left in the season and the Kings have not been eliminated from the playoffs, from the play-in, I shouldn't say playoff, because, I mean, it's an opportunity to make the playoffs, but it's not the playoffs. I don't consider it the playoffs. Then if they're in it, then, like, that's where I'm like, why not go forward at that point? Like, it's too late now. You've already you've already killed yourself in the draft
Yeah,
lottery.
it's already done. That's what I was saying. It's already done as far as on
Yeah.
the losing side. Like you're not gonna move up. You might as well go out there and try to win the games.
Well, if somehow you do sneak that 10, you could go all the way up to the 10th pick. That's what we're talking about, because you would jump over teams like the Lakers and you would jump over teams like the Spurs and everything else. And that's the crazy thing. The Kings, as of like, I think going into yesterday, it's not that they were just like way far out of it, but there are two teams in between them and the 10th seed. Mm-hmm. They're the 13. They're not even like 11, like nipping at the heels. No. They're like boom, boom, boom. They're like, there's only two teams below them.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's Fox. I get is just I get Fox as a potential, like, let's just wait and see. Sabonis, man, it'd be really tough to march Sabonis back out there for the final 4 games, regardless of where the Kings are in this thing.
Well, I don't know that his knee injury is that bad.
Okay. All right. I don't know what to say. Like, I just like this isn't a repeat of a conversation the three of us had last season. Like, this is just the same conversation over and over. Change a few names here and there. What was their record last year? 31 wins. Is that what they had? Like, are they going to win 31 wins for the 3rd season in a row?
Well, if they do, that would actually be a pretty big feat. I mean, that would mean that they go 4-3 to finish this year. And you got to remember the previous 2 seasons were only 71 games. So those are really prorated 35-win seasons. And that means that you've taken a step backwards.
Yep. That's where we are.
Reality.
Step backwards. Yeah. It's a cold, cold world out there. But, as we search through different things, I mean, we spent some time today, James, trying to figure out like what this last stretch of like 2 or 3 games from Davion means. Davion played, really well. He's led the team over the course of the last couple games. It's 20 plus points, 3 straight games for Davion. But ultimately, he's the number 1 guy when the real number 1 guy and the real number 2 guy aren't around right now. So trying to figure out how all of this is going to translate into whatever his role is next year is becoming increasingly difficult.
I think it is, because most of what he's doing is as a major ball dominant player, and like his usage rate has gone up. But like I told you guys this a couple of times early on, the issues that I had sort of with Davion is I've always looked at him as an undersized 2, right? I've never looked at him as a point guard, unless he's playing with a big time combo, like a guy like Tyrese. Like I think him and Tyrese could have been an interesting backcourt. I think there's potential for him and Fox to play together for long stretches, just because Fox is 6'3" and long, and he can go over and guard, some shooting guards in the league. But my issue with him is that I thought it would take him a year or 2, maybe 3, to get to be where he was a player that could really run the offense. And now what we're doing is we're seeing him being forced to run the offense. And I think Dante DiVincenzo talked about it after the game the other night. He said, like, Davion was incredible, but the 2 biggest plays for him were the 2 assists in overtime. Those were the 2 big plays for him, where he found DiVincenzo in the corner for wide open 3, who hit it, and he found Harrison Barnes for wide open 3, who hit it. That, to me, the 9 assists, but it's not just the 9 assists, it's that he didn't try to force something. He didn't do something silly down the stretch. He made the right play. He looked like a point guard. I've been waiting to see him look like a point guard. The only way he was ever going to get an opportunity to look like a point guard is if he played major minutes and got that opportunity. I didn't see that happening, because coming into the season, you had DeAaron Fox and you had Tyrese Halliburton. So I think that's why this time is so valuable, because you do learn things about players. You do see players grow. And people want to just throw away the final 7 games of the season. Well, what if those final 7 games equate to 3 more wins next year? Because 1 or 2 players figured out how to play together, or they got some sort of a player learned something that he didn't know before, or found his game in a different way, which is what we're seeing with Davion. That's kind of why you don't just give up. And if you give up, like, I would like to tell you that OKC is going to come out of this saying, with all their like 17, their war chest of 17 draft picks, that they're going to be some team that's on the rise, right? Well, at the same time, like, you took Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and you turned him into a loser, because he's a loser. I mean, look at his record as a player. Like, that's what you've done to him, and that's what you've done to all their players. So either you're going to have to find a whole new batch of players, or you're going to have to, which, hopefully they will, because they have all these draft picks. But at some point, there has to be some sort of cultural change where, you're trying to do something that's positive, and not like, losing games isn't positive for anybody. It beats up everybody. And it just saws through coaches and it saws through front office members. That's what losing does. And so, again, like, I don't like that they're killing their draft stock just like everyone else, but I also keep looking at this team and thinking, at some point, you can't just talk about winning. You have to actually win. And they just can't do it. And so maybe this is one of those moments where, again, they find something, some small kernel that makes them better going forward. And that's, I think, the biggest thing.
We just talked about, and I use Indiana as an example, and not to shade those guys at all, but they're getting blasted on a nightly basis right now. Do you think that for young teams and teams in the King situation and in the Indiana situation, the way you finish can bleed into what you do in the offseason and going into next season? Or because there is so much turnover in the league, are they completely unrelated, in your opinion?
I would love to tell you that it's completely unrelated, but then we have the Phoenix Suns, like, we have the Phoenix Suns who go 8-0 in the bubble, who didn't deserve an invite to the bubble. I've said that repeatedly. They were so bad that they went 8-0 in the bubble and still didn't make the play-in tournament. That's how bad they were. They did not deserve to be there. But what that 8 games did is it allowed one franchise to, like, pole vault over like 3 or 4 or 8 other franchises somehow. Where with the Kings, that 8 games was absolutely disastrous. It literally killed their franchise. It set their franchise back maybe 4 years, because you go, what did they go? 1-7 in the bubble, 2-6 in the bubble.
2-6, yeah, they beat New Orleans twice, right? I don't know, they beat New Orleans and the Lakers or something like that. They might have won 3 actually.
And then Vlade Divac gets fired, right? And then
he resigned.
Well, yes, Vlade Divac gets fired, followed by Monty McNair comes in and doesn't match the offer to Bogdan Bogdanovic. That again, now you don't have a coach and a GM on the same page. You got a new GM and a coach that's waiting till he gets fired, and you can't fire him because he still has 3 years left on his contract, and you keep him on for 20 games because you don't want to pay a regular salary. You want to pay an interim salary. I mean, again, like, that 8 games led one franchise to the Western Conference Finals the next year, the NBA Finals the next year. It led the other one to a massive reduction in performance. Massive. I mean, holy cow. The Kings should have... They won 31 the year before with the bubble, and that means that they should have gone on last year to win like 36. They didn't. They stripped down their team. They lost their starting shooting guard. They made a bunch of like non-major moves. And then you get into this year, and it's just like, it's a continuation of the same event, which is the bubble. Now a coach gets fired 20-something games into a season, all those things. Like, it's the ripple effect that always seems to hit this Sacramento Kings team again and again.
So what's going to be different next year? I mean, why should any? Because I know Kings fans they're frustrated. They're not, they're very kind of pessimistic about next year and this offseason and all this other stuff. And why wouldn't they be? Like, what's there to feel like this is finally going to change?
That's hard. Like Sean pointed out that I'm being insincere because Chris Paul joined the Suns. Chris Paul is one player. One player doesn't take a team from like, okay, so what do they finish with? 31, 32 wins, 30, 31 to like, they're going to win over 60 games this season. That's not one player. Chris Paul has missed. It's an identity that they formed in the bubble. And Chris Paul is part of that.
And James, I'll also say, kind of to your point, Chris Paul, without that 8 games and seeing how they finished and seeing how Devin Booker played in the bubble, may not have been willing to go to Phoenix at that time. So, that we don't know these things. These aren't factual, but I think they do play a role in him being willing to go to Phoenix and be like, this is a place where I could help turn some things around.
And we definitely won't point out the fact he had a relationship with Monty Williams, and we won't point that stuff out because it's not important.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it. All those things matter, right? But at the same time, like, you had to have something there because just dropping in a 35-year-old making $40-something million, that doesn't make sense unless
ready
there's
to make another
there.
$40-something million in the next year.
Jesus. And so when you ask about the Kings, I mean, I think that the thing that I would point to is that I think you have something with Fox and Sabonis. I think you do. Like the way that they've played together. Now what can you do to build around it? Or can you not? Because if you don't build around it, this team might win 35, 36 games next year. Like, and I think that's a, probably it's a pretty high number for where they are today. But I also don't think this team was as bad as they've ended up. So anyway, yeah, I think there are positives like going into the summer. You do have some cap space. You do have movable pieces. You do have expiring contracts. You do have all of your draft picks. Even if your draft pick is, falls to number 9, it's still a top 10 draft pick. And I don't know that there's a substantial difference between player number 7 and player number 12 in this year's draft. And I even think that there's not a surefire top 6 in this draft. So you just don't know who's going to be there. It's kind of like last year's draft where guys were moving all over the place all the way up until draft night.
Yeah. Yeah, last year's draft was something. We had names. You'd see a name at 3, and you'd see that same name at 12 in a different mock draft or whatever. So,
did anyone have Primo going like in the lottery? I don't think anyone had him in the first round. Maybe in the late first round. Yeah, there were some guys that went high. So there's always mistakes. There's always guys that just skyrocket up. There's guys that teams choose because they have a specific identity and they're chasing something very, very specific.
Well, that's not us. If you can play, particularly the 4 or the 2, give us a call. We're placing ads in newspapers now. Are you a guard who can shoot? Are you a 4 who could stretch the floor? Call Monty.
Can you block a shot?
I do, James. I did say.
Can you stay in front of a guy for 2 dribbles?
Oh my gosh, that's the saddest.
All right, my bad.
Time. We go see these kids stay in front of a guy for 2 dribbles tonight.
Oh man, all right, man. To the kids out there, boy, it's gonna be. Hammer. You're a former coach. Kenny's kids did not perform this weekend, and they're about to.
We got work to do.
About to be an ugly practice today.
We got work to do. Those Pat Riley practices? They're gonna be a cupcake compared to what we're doing tonight.
So what are they
ready? We're sleeping.
What aren't they young?
Yeah, they're 9. Young?
Okay, and what did they do wrong in this game?
They just need to learn now the values of playing defense.
From the way Kenny's acting, like everything, literally did everything wrong.
Okay,
I love my kids.
Got a collection of buddies out there.
My job for these young little 9-year-olds is to install into them how to play the game. So by the time they get to high school, the only thing they need to learn is that coach's playbook. They don't need to learn how to play basketball because they were dealing with Coach Kenny for 5 years and they know what to do.
I'll say this:
start now.
in the years that I coached, I coached with a buddy of mine who had coached soccer for 25 years. This was a secret to him that I was always impressed with, because I was green coaching, but I'm good with dealing with kids and stuff. We would get to a practice after a game, and I knew what killed us in the game. We would get to a practice, and we would start doing some really strange drill. And I would be like, I have no idea. And about 5 minutes into watching the drill, I figured out that he had a drill to fix every single thing that our boys did wrong. And so while your first instinct is to yell and scream and demand something, the better idea might be to find a game that is fun and hilarious and teaches them how to play defense without them understanding that they're learning how to play defense. Because then you get them like energized and they're loving it, and you're teaching from a place of positive reinforcement, as opposed to the anger that you want to feel for kids that don't play D, or who won't pass to feet, or who do some of the things that they do. And so that I learned that was one of those moments where you're
don't think that's happening at Kenny's practice today.
Yeah,
holy
defense
cow.
is fun.
Yeah.
There is no fun allowed at Kenny's practice.
Defense is a ball.
Go subscribe to the Kings Beat podcast. Go to thekingsbeat.com and subscribe to the Kings Beat newsletter. Go become a premium subscriber at the Kings Beat. Go buy some Kings Beat merchandise. If you got some kids, rename them Kings Beat. Just make sure you're supporting our man, James Ham, here with us, who has the Kings winning the rest of their games and making the playoffs. You heard it here first.